They didn't see a threat, just a quiet girl with an old bag. In their world of arrogance, silence was weakness. But legends don't speak. They aim. The shooting range buzzed with sharp cracks and laughter. Men in sleek tactical gear handled their rifles like trophies, comparing specs, boasting about grouping, mocking anything that didn't glitter. Into this polished chaos stepped a quiet figure, a young woman, head down, shoulders relaxed, dressed in faded jeans and a worn jacket. An old case dangled from her hand, its leather frayed at the edges. She walked without hurry, her eyes scanning, not for approval, but for direction. A pair of shooters paused mid-conversation to glance at her. One leaned over and smirked. "Tourists get in here now?" The other snorted. "Hope someone tells her which end the bullet comes out of." She gave no reaction, no flinch, no frown, just kept walking. At the counter, an instructor looked up and blinked, caught off guard. He gestured toward the door. "Miss, this area's for experienced members only. You might be—" She simply raised a hand, calm and precise, pointing to an empty lane at the far end. Something in her eyes stopped him. He nodded slowly, as if unsure why. As she approached the lane, more glances followed her, some amused, others indifferent. She knelt, opened her case. No sleek carbon fiber finish, no engraved stock, just a clean vintage rifle that looked like it belonged in a museum. A few chuckles echoed from nearby lanes. One shooter raised his voice. "Someone lend her a real rifle before she hurts herself." A few others laughed, shaking their heads. She said nothing. She didn't look at them. She checked the scope, standard, scratched, but aligned. She loaded a single round, her fingers deliberate. Then she stood, breathed in, and stepped into position. The tone of the range shifted, not respect, not yet, but curiosity. The way she moved was too smooth to be luck, too practiced to be casual. Conversations faltered, rifles lowered. The smugness hovered but thinned. They watched, half expecting a mistake, half hoping for one. She didn't speak, didn't glance, only aimed, still, focused, and ready. The air seemed to hold its breath. She breathed in, slow and measured, her fingers wrapping around the rifle with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of it by feel alone. Her eyes, calm and unblinking, locked into the scope. Through the glass, the farthest target available, a narrow silhouette at 900 meters. Wind flags danced erratically, the breeze unpredictable. No spotter, no digital rangefinder, no help. Just the faint whistle of wind and her silent calculation. She adjusted slightly, elevation, windage, each movement precise, instinctual. Then, nothing. A stillness. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Bang. The sound cracked through the range, sharp and solitary. A heartbeat later, the distant metal target rang, clean, unmistakable, dead center. A ripple of silence moved across the lanes. One of the shooters scoffed under his breath. "Beginner's luck." But his tone was thinner now. Another leaned in, narrowing his eyes, trying to assess what he just saw. She didn't flinch, didn't glance around. Instead, she calmly pulled another round from her pocket, loaded it with the same deliberate pace. She turned her scope to a moving target now, zigzagging on a motorized track, half the size of the first. Bang! The hit was perfect. Center mass. The clatter of movement stopped. More heads turned. The laughter was gone. The grin on the nearest shooter's face twitched, unsure whether to stay or leave. One of them lifted his binoculars to verify, adjusting the focus, breath caught. Another tapped at the screen mounted beside his lane, pulling up the overhead footage. He rewound it slowly, jaw tightening. She stood still, composed, as if she hadn't noticed the shift around her. But everything had changed. The swagger in the room was now silence. No one reached for their rifles. No one looked away. They were watching, studying, trying to reconcile the old rifle, the quiet stance, the precise execution. Someone, barely above a whisper, said what the others were only thinking. That shot was at 1,000 meters, through a crosswind. The words hung in the air, heavy with realization. The girl they mocked hadn't come to learn. She had come to remind them. The air had shifted, thick with something unfamiliar, respect, or maybe fear. One of the shooters, previously the loudest, stepped forward. His voice tried to stay steady, but the edge was there. "Head to head," he said. "3 targets, no rest, 1 shot each." He tried to smirk, to reclaim ground he'd already lost. She didn't speak, just nodded once. The challenge was accepted. They took their lanes side by side. The crowd, once scattered and amused, was now focused and silent. Phones came out, cameras rolling. This was no longer about ego. It was something else. First target, a moving metal plate sliding rapidly across the far wall. The elitist shot first, clipping the edge. Before the plate could swing back, she fired. Direct hit. Center. Second target, an axe blade placed upright with a small balloon behind it. The challenge was to split the bullet and burst the balloon on both sides. He missed entirely. She stepped up, breathed in, adjusted slightly, and fired. The bullet split perfectly. 2 pops followed a single shot. Gasps followed. Final target, a tiny disc barely visible at 1,200 meters, positioned far beyond the standard range. The shooter wiped his brow, adjusted his scope, fired. Miss Dust kicked up several feet to the side. He froze. She waited, eyes narrowed through her scope. Wind, distance, curvature. She made no notes, just felt it. Then fired. The disc rang out with a high-pitched ping that echoed like a bell. Bullseye. The range fell into absolute silence. The instructor, who'd barely spoken before, murmured, "That's military-grade skill. Maybe better." A few people lowered their rifles, no longer interested in shooting. Others kept recording, disbelief written all over their faces. As she walked back toward the bench, her sleeve shifted. For a second, the fabric lifted just enough to reveal a faded tattoo near her wrist. An insignia, sharp angles, coiled numbers, a crest only a few would recognize. Elite Forces, Sniper Division. From the back of the crowd, an older man leaned forward. His eyes narrowed, then softened. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Respect from one ghost to another. She reached her case, packed the rifle with the same calm care she'd shown since the beginning. Someone finally spoke the question, now sitting in every throat. "Who is she?" She didn't answer, just lifted her bag, turned, and walked toward the exit without looking back. The range was quiet now, but the silence was different. Heavier, reverent. At the far end, a young shooter stood near the instructor, voice low with awe. "She was trained, right?" The instructor shook his head slowly, watching the doorway she'd just passed through. "Not trained," he said. "Forged." The words settled over them like dust. Around the benches, the once laughing elites stood subdued, some checking their gear without interest, others whispering to each other. Names were being tossed around, old stories of phantom snipers, tales passed between units, rumors of a woman who once cleared an entire hillside in a snowstorm without backup. Eyes darted, trying to connect the legend to the face they'd just seen, but never truly looked at. At the front desk, the clerk took her ID almost absently, still distracted by the lingering tension in the air. Then, his eyes dropped to the name. He blinked, looked up at her, mouth slightly open, recognition dawning like a punch to the chest. She said nothing, just took the card back and walked on. Outside, the sky hung low and gray. She moved with the same steady rhythm, unbothered, unhurried, as if the weight of the last hour didn't touch her. Her boots hit the pavement in a calm, measured beat. Behind her, a door opened. A voice called her name. She didn't stop, didn't turn. Her path continued, fading into the mist ahead. Somewhere, the world played her story like a film behind closed eyes. Flash, her in camouflage, prone on a rooftop, eyes fixed through the scope. Flash, white snow, a breath held, one shot. Flash, a medal in a velvet box, untouched, a folded flag in shaking hands, a departure without words, without parade. She became a figure again, not flesh and voice, but memory, a ghost with a purpose, a myth grounded only by those who had once stood near enough to witness. As the fog swallowed her silhouette, the voice returned, this time from within, a quiet narration etched against the stillness of the range and the minds of those left behind. You don't always see legends coming, but you always remember when they leave,